So yesterday we discussed till as the 1920s, the non-cooperation movement. Non-cooperation movement. Yes, till as the end of the non-cooperation movement. That non-cooperation movement, which was as ended on an incident of a Chauri Chaura, where the policemen they burnt alive by a group of the farmers, which were beaten by the policemen on a February 1922. In this, when Gandhiji heard the news of a Chauri Chaura, so suddenly he withdrew from a non-cooperation movement. He withdrew from the non-cooperation movement from all over the country. So afterwards, a non-cooperation movement, the incidents, the important incidents which were occurred in country after the Chauri Chaura incident, the Congress leaders Chittaranjan Das and Motilal Nehru, they argued that the party should fight as elections, enter legislative councils and influence the government policies from within. In December 1922, these leaders were called as pro-changers. They formed a party within the Congress known as the Swaraj Party. The another group within the Congress, including Vallabhbhai Patel, Rajendra Prasad, C. Rajgopalachari, who were called as the No Changers. No Changers decided to undertake the constructive work in the villages. They decided, No Changers decided to take as the constructive work in villages. There were some of the other important events that were happened afterwards. The non-cooperation movement, non-cooperation movement that the people started to loot it as the liquor shops and shut them down. Most number of satyagrahis, they directly impact over the British economic policies by stop the functioning of liquor shops, which were functioned in at a larger scale in all over the country as per the ideology of Gandhiji, non-violence, they directly impact on society. Second, the formation of a Communist Party of India. It was encouraged from the Russian Revolution. Russian Revolution occurred in 1917. Russian Revolution occurred on 1917 because of their influence as the Communist Party. Marxist ideas followed by the Communist Party founded in India. In Punjab, those monks which were appointed by the Britishers for maintenance of the Gurudwaras, they became as a corrupt and under that scenario in that time period. So to remove the Mahants from the Gurudwaras and protection of the sacred Sikh places, Akali movement started at a national level in a different number of different parts of a country, especially through this event, Nankana Sahib of Amritsar, Nankana Sahib of Pakistan, and Harmandir Sahib of Amritsar, they were protected from the influence of Mahants. In that time period, there was another group of nationalist leaders which were known as the revolutionaries. Revolutionaries, they became as active. Revolutionaries, they became as active under that scenario when Congress through their policies, it impact over Britishers through the different number of the movements, strikes, or the bunds. In revolutionaries as Hindustan Socialist Republican Party, which was founded by the Chandrasekhar Azad and its allies, Bhagat Singh, Rajguru, Sukhdev, Ram Prasad Bismil, Ashfaqullah Khan, Batukeshwar Dutt. Such allies of Chandrasekhar Azad founded the Hindustan Socialist Republican Party, which followed the path of violence. They were known as the revolutionaries. Such revolutionary activities, these were occurred in a larger in scale in all over the country. All over a country, they looted as a Kakori train, which was used by the Britishers to movement of Indian wealth towards England. In that time period, a number of the peasant revolts and labor movements, they led by the Baba Ramchandra, Vijay Singh Pathik, and N.G. Ranga, leading to the formation of the All India Kisan Sabha in 1936. When the emergence of Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose, who sought freedom and independence for India in different ways, for which as Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru opted as a path of Gandhiji's philosophy, in the other side as a Subhash Chandra Bose. Subhash Chandra Bose, he struggled to make themselves as a free from the British control, through which he escaped from India via Afghanistan. Through Afghanistan, he escaped himself and moved towards as a Germany for the support for the formation of a Indian Army, Indian National Army, which later in stage framed with support of Japan in a Second World War, Azad Hind Fauj. So these were the important events which were occur after the time period of the non-cooperation. After the non-cooperation in 1920, such important events, these were occurred at a large scale in all over the country. All over the country. Mid of the 1920s, it was the era when Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh, RSS, founded in our country. RSS, the Communist Party, we discuss as a Communist Party. Bhagat Singh and their allies, revolutionary leaders, they founded as the Hindustan Socialist Republican Party. They founded the Hindustan Socialist Republican Party. Hindustan Socialist Republican Party. In a year of 1929, under the presidency of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, under the leadership of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, in 1929, he raised the demand of Purna Swaraj, the complete independence, in a Congress session. Purna Swaraj. The demand of Purna Swaraj raised by the Pandit Nehru in 1929. Before of it, in November 1927, the British government appointed a 7-member commission under Sir John Simon. To study the working of the government and influence of INC, Indian National Congress in India. But the commission had no Indian member. The INC, Indian National Congress, at its December 1927 session held in a Madras to resolve to boycott the commission. The Muslim League too followed the Congress, in which, as the mass agitation organized in all over a country, it was led by the Lala Lajpat Rai. Lala Lajpat Rai. In February 1928, protesters greeted the Simon Commission on its arrival with black flags. And there's the slogan of Simon Go Back. Simon Go Back. During one such protest rally, Lala Lajpat Rai sustained fatal injuries following a lathi charge by the police. Lathi charge by the police. In 1928, Motilal Nehru and Tej Bahadur Sapru drafted a tentative constitution called the Nehru Report, in which he demanded the dominion status for India. The Purna Swaraj Declaration demanding complete independence from British rule was made, and the Congress also decided to launch a civil disobedience movement under leadership of Gandhiji. Leadership of Gandhiji. In same time period, 1929, Bhagat Singh and its allies on 17 December 1928, Bhagat Singh with its allies, Rajguru and Azad, Chandrasekhar Azad, they assassinated the Saunders. That person who was a culprit for the opening the lathi charge on such activists which were moving under the leadership of Lala Lajpat Rai, and due to which the injuries given by the British officials, Lala Lajpat Rai assassinated, he killed. In 1929, Bhagat Singh and Batukeshwar Dutt, they exploded as bombs in a assembly, in a central legislative assembly at Delhi. The aim of a blast of a bomb is to raise the voice of Indians in against of the British policies. So Bhagat Singh and the other allies, they also arrested from different parts of our country, except Chandrasekhar Azad. So Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev and Rajguru finally as executed on 23rd March 1931. At the age of 23, Bhagat Singh, it was as sacrificed himself for the nation, for the freedom of a nation. In 1930, Gandhiji called a civil disobedience movement. Against the Britishers. He announced that he would break the salt law. At that time, Britishers, they imposed as the taxes, increase as a taxes on a basic items like as a salt. So against of such act of Britishers, Gandhiji started as a civil disobedience movement. In such days, the salt manufacturing was the monopoly of the government. Monopoly means monopoly is a such kind of a market situation in which a limited number of producers present in a market. If the limited number of producers are there, if they will sell their products at a high cost, consumers are bound to purchase on a such expensive way. Same happens during as a colonial rule when they restricted, as according to the earlier Charter Act of 1830, Britishers ended as a monopoly of European companies. Britishers ended the monopoly of European companies. In market, the limited number of producers were present, which were responsible for availability of goods in markets. Under such circumstances, they exploited the consumers by selling their goods at a high cost. So the monopoly rights of the British government over the manufacturing of a salt leads to increase as the prices of a salt, which was as an essential item for the ordinary person. People had to pay a tax whenever they purchased salt. On 12th March 1930, Gandhiji, along with their 78 followers, started their march from Sabarmati Ashram. They started their march from Sabarmati Ashram to the coastal town of Dandi. Coastal town of Dandi, which is known in history as the famous Dandi March. Dandi March, where they broke the government laws by gathering the natural salt found on the seashore and boiling the sea water to produce salt. Gandhiji's Dandi March marked the beginning of the civil disobedience movement. Civil disobedience movement. People from all sections, communities, genders, they participated in the movement. Thousands of women took part in picketing the shops selling the foreign clothes and liquor. The famous poetess Sarojini Naidu led a march of the Satyagrahis to government-owned salt depots. The role played by women organizations such as Desh Sevika Sangh and Nari Satyagrah Samiti was remarkable. In the northwestern parts of a country, the Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who was popularly known as the Frontier Gandhi, led the movement against of the British manufacturing units. British manufacturing units. Till there, any questions? Yes, A3. Till there, any questions? In this civil disobedience movement, a large number of Indians, these were as arrested and sent behind the bars. Sent behind the bars by the Britishers. To set up as a cordial relations in between of Congress and, yes, any questions? Any questions? To set up as the cordial and constructive relations in between of Congress and the Britishers started to organize as a round table conferences. They started to organize as the round table conferences in which as the Gandhiji, congressmen and the British officials, they started to discuss as those disputed issues which was as responsible for the clash in between of the Britishers and the Congress. So in November 1930, the first roundtable conference was convened in London. The Congress boycotted the conference. No decision could be taken due to the absence of the Congress leaders. In 1931, Viceroy Irwin and Gandhiji signed a pact, a treaty which is known in history as a Gandhi-Irwin Pact. Gandhi-Irwin Pact. According to this pact, the Congress agreed to withdraw the civil disobedience movement and attend the second roundtable conference. In this return, the British government promised to release all Indian prisoners arrested for participating in civil disobedience movement and remove the tax on salt, which was as a reason behind the beginning of a civil disobedience movement. In a second roundtable conference of 1931, no agreement on independence could be reached. Gandhiji announced the revival of the civil disobedience movement again, for which as Britishers held the third roundtable conference in London in 1932. It was also failed. Because the Congress did not take part in it, the Congress suspended the civil disobedience movement in May 1933 and finally withdrew it in 1934. Withdrew it in 1934. Till there, any questions? Yes. Any questions? In 1935, Britishers passed the Government of India Act. Government of India Act passed by the Britishers. In 1935. So in 1935, the Britishers passed the Government of India Act, which accepted the idea of a federation in India, which prescribed the provincial autonomy, provincial legislatures, provincial autonomy or legislatures approved of a bicameral legislature at the center and in some provinces, and proposed the setting up of provincial governments. Provincial governments means as the state governments, it would be as a present in a British rule. Provincial government, all those provinces which were managed under the British control, these were total in number 562. 562. Out of which as a 562, 7 states it will be having it will be possessed their own self-governments, own state governments. 7 states it will be having their own state governments, which was as marked under the Government of India Act. The act did not satisfy any of the important objectives of the Indian national movement. The Congress, rejecting the act, decided to participate in the upcoming elections for the provincial legislative assemblies. Provincial legislative assemblies of 1937. The elections came with the thumping victory of the Congress. The Second World War broke in a world in 1939, which continued till the 1945. Second World War, it was a result of that insult of Germany, which took place by the Britain, France, and US. through the America, the insult of Germany, their revenge taken by the Hitler, Sir Adolf, sorry, Hitler, the Nazi leader of Germany. Many Congress leaders offered to support the Britishers as a war effort. In return, they hoped that India, it would be as a granted independence after the war by the Britishers. When it became clear that the British would not agree to this, the Congress ministers, they resigned. They started as a protest against of the Britishers, and they took back their support to British government in war front. There was a political agitations all over the country. In October 1940, Mahatma Gandhi launched the Satyagraha with Vinoba Bhave as the first person to participate. He took the support of more than 25,000 Satyagrahis, which were imprisoned by the Britishers under this era of a Second World War. On August 1942, the All India Congress Committee, it held their session in Bombay and passed the historic Quit India Resolution. Quit India Resolution passed by the Congress on 1942. It proposed a mass struggle on the widest possible scale under leadership of Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhiji gave his mantra of do or die and asked the British to quit the India, to quit and leave India. To quit and leave India to Indians. There were the countryside strikes, bunds, processions against of the British repression. Mass civil disobedience began, and the railways, police, law courts were all affected. On August 1942, Gandhiji and all other members of a Congress working committee were arrested by Britishers. The leaderless mob openly started attacking the means of communication and symbols of authority. By the end of 1943, more than 90,000 people had been arrested and around 1,000 people were killed in police firings. The Quit India movement demonstrated the depth of nationalist feelings, the example of patriotism in the country, the capacity for a struggle and the sense of a sacrifice among the Indian people. It was now clear that the transfer of power to an independent India, it was around to the corner. It's not as an easy task for the Britishers through which they can manage such territories which raise their voice against of the injustice done by Britishers since last 1.5 century. 1.5 century. Till there any questions? Yes. Any questions? Till there any questions? Any questions? Those who want to ask a question, click their video cameras. Otherwise, you will not allow. So revival of a revolutionary or a nationalist feelings, the nationalism in India, since 1920s towards the 1930s, New revolutionary organizations were set up all over the country. Conferences were held in Kanpur in 1924, which was attended by the revolutionaries like Ram Prasad Bismil, Sachidanand Sanyal, Chandrasekhar Azad, Jogesh Chatterjee, Ashfaqullah Khan, Batukeshwar Dutt, such dignitaries which were contributed in a formation of a Hindustan Republican Associations. That party, Revolutionary Party, it changed their name, changed by the Bhagat Singh as Hindustan Socialist Republican Party. Hindustan Socialist Republican Party. Its aim was to organize the armed resistance against of a foreign rule and to set up a republic based on an adult franchise. On August 1925, a train to the Lucknow was looted at Kakori. The revolutionaries involved were arrested and tried in the Kakori conspiracy case. Ram Prasad Bismil and Roshan Singh, Ashfaqullah Khan and Rajendra Lahiri, they were sentenced to death. Bhagat Singh and his two allies, Rajguru and Sukhdev, these were the imprisoned and the death sentence. It was as a pass on a case of a Sanders killing. That individual, that British official responsible for a death of a Lala Lajpat Rai in a mass procession against of the Simon Commission. Bhagat Singh and their two allies, Rajguru and Sukhdev, they were tried in the Lahore conspiracy case and declared as a death sentence on assassination of a Sanders, a person which was responsible for the opening a lathi charge that led to the death of a Lala Lajpat Rai. Clear? So any questions still there? Rest we will continue in our next class. Any queries? Any queries? Any questions? Yes.